Hi, Jesse.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Excited for today. Our
Oh, man.
sound and
It's
video are great. If you want to go ahead and share,
okay.
we're already sent live to YouTube.
Great. He's closing extraneous windows.
Oh, yes. Notifications off.
Well, I keep them off anyway. So,
Smart. I love that. Uh, s- Self-care practice. We'll go
absolutely.
with. Looking good. All right. We can turn audio and video off for now, and I'll handle it till the top of the hour, and then we'll get started.
Fantastic. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. I'm so excited for today.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you got here extra early, you're in the right place for Ed Talks. We will get started at the top of the hour. Please feel free to grab yourself your favorite beverage and get a comfortable seat. We'll get started then. Thank you for joining us. Hello, everyone. I'm showing about 10 minutes until the top of the hour. If you're looking for Ed Talks, you're in the right place. We will begin in about 10 minutes. Please feel free to use the chat and chat with your colleagues before we get started. Get yourself a comfy seat. We will get started in about 10 minutes. Thank you. Hello, everyone. It is 12:55 Pacific time. Just a couple of housekeeping items. We will begin at the top of the hour. To open your chat window, click on the bottom toolbar at the lower end of your screen, and that chat icon will launch the chat. We encourage you at this time to say hello and chat with other participants while we're waiting to begin. Just be sure your chat is set to everyone so we can all see. As a quick announcement, as indicated in the registration for this gathering, by attending the Zoom webinar, you acknowledge that this session will be recorded and may be used for future UAGC presentations. Welcome. Grab a cup of tea, water, or your beverage of choice, and our story will begin soon. Next slide, please. Yolanda, can we go to the next slide, please? Perfect. Thank you so much. Before we begin, as indicated in the registration for this gathering, by attending the Zoom webinar, you acknowledge that this session will be recorded and may be used for future UAGC presentations. Welcome. We know you have many choices when selecting your professional development activities, and there are some amazing opportunities here at the University of Arizona Global Campus and beyond. We're happy that you chose to join us today as the UAGC Department of Education and Liberal Arts proudly presents to you Ed Talks. I'm Dr. Jessie Upshaw, and I'm honored to lead the Professional Development Committee of the Department of Education and Liberal Arts here in the UAGC College of Arts and Sciences. I'll be your host this afternoon. Today, we continue our 10th annual Ed Talks series with our 5th session. For those of you that are new to Ed Talks, this is not your traditional professional development webinar. Ed Talks are fashioned after TED Talks, the ever-popular way of sharing concepts through personal storytelling. Our 2024 Ed Talk series is entitled Flourishing in Open Access Education, which examines supporting students and colleagues in open access environments through the lens of positive psychology. Each story takes the work of Martin Seligman's Flourish, a visionary new understanding of happiness and well-being, and considers the relationship between well-being and the contemporary culture of open access or open enrollment higher education. Here to explore and extend our journey towards supporting well-being with her story of the grit intelligence paradigm is Dr. Yolanda Harper. As you listen to Yolanda's story, you might listen for your call to action to share your practices that promote growth and supporting well-being in your classroom and your interactions with your students and your colleagues. Or perhaps you will find a new practice that her story or our discussion sparks for you. Yolanda, will you come on camera and say hello as I introduce you?
Hi, everyone. Happy Thursday before commencement.
Woo! Thank you for being here, Dr. Harper. Dr. Yolanda Harper earned her PhD and master's degrees in clinical psychology from the University of Arkansas, Fayetteville. Dr. Harper joined the UAGC community as a full-time instructor in 2013 and loves having opportunities to interact with diverse learners working toward making their dreams a reality. For her, learning and sharing knowledge is a lifestyle. In classes and in mentoring, her style is often like a coach. Psychology is an extremely diverse and broad field, and Dr. Harper's current areas of special interest in the field includes positive psychology, holistic wellness, instructor presence, leadership, career development, psychology of music and language, inclusive excellence, multicultural and diversity programming, and evaluation and assessment. When not teaching, Dr. Harper enjoys spending time with loved ones, writing, traveling, photography, cooking, supporting several community organizations, and spending time outdoors and in nature. A fun fact about Yolanda: in her spare time, she is an author of children's books. Thank you so much for being here today, Dr. Harper.
Thank you, Jessie.
Yolanda, I'm now going to ask that we remove our videos as we get started with our story after a few brief announcements. Next slide, please. As a reminder, Ed Talks are fashioned after TED Talks, the ever-popular way of sharing personal stories for only 18 minutes of monologue. We do this because we want to hear your stories, and we can best do that by sharing our stories. Our goal here is not necessarily to teach you anything new, as you are already an expert in your field. Our goal is to perhaps motivate you to try something new in your approach to helping your students succeed. Our storytelling approach is geared to not take a lot of your time, but rather to simply set the stage for an interactive conversation and perhaps encourage you to encourage your students in some new way. As I mentioned at the beginning of our time today, our 2024 Ed Talk series, Reflection and Extension, is inspired by the principles and work of Martin Seligman and his book, Flourish. At the end of our Ed Talk today, we look forward to hearing your story of what you are doing or will do in your classroom or educational setting. After Dr. Harper's story, we will invite all participants to share your reflection and practices. So with that said, audience members, if you could please hold your comments and chat to the end as we listen to Yolanda's story. Let's get started. Yolanda, the microphone is yours.
Thank you, Jessie. Well, hello again, everyone. What a great day to dialogue about grit. as you listen to my stories and examples, consider these 3 questions that we'll revisit later. The first is about strategies to help us understand our students' mindsets. The second is about communicating positive expectations to promote persistence. And the third is about understanding how our grit and resilience interact with our students. Now, it was a few weeks before my 3rd birthday, and my parents took me to visit Uncle Charlie. Now, at that time, Uncle Charlie was single and apparently believed children were created to fetch things for adults. So he sent me to the kitchen to bring him a beer. After spending more time in the kitchen than expected, Mom called me back into the living room. And when I emerged empty-handed, Uncle Charlie said, "Where's my beer?" Matter-of-factly, I responded, "You're out of beer." Uncle Charlie disputed my claim. "What are you talking about, girl? I've got plenty of beer." Now, having seen the contents of his refrigerator with my own 2 eyes, I disagreed. "No, you don't." Now, to prove his precocious little niece wrong, Uncle Charlie marches into the kitchen and emerges with a bottle. "What is this?" "I don't know." "It's beer." "No, it's not." At that point, my dad, who would one day be an award-winning special education teacher, joins the conversation and asks in typical educator fashion, "Why did you say Uncle Charlie didn't have any beer?" "Because when you're out of Schlitz, you're out of beer."
Nothing else comes near when you're out of Schlitz. You're out of beer.
And so it was revealed that the full extent of my education about beer was based on a commercial with a catchy jingle and a clown. Now, presumably, after the adults stopped laughing, my parents educated me in a way that left me feeling smarter and not the least bit discouraged by not having known. So one of the many questions this story prompts me to ask myself is, when students draw conclusions based on sources we deem not valid or appropriate, perhaps even biased by their own personal experiences, how do we provide feedback that corrects and encourages? For me, doing so begins with understanding the whats, the whys, and the hows. Dad asked the question to gain an understanding of my thinking. So when students' work or comments indicate they don't understand a concept or even why they earned a particular grade, on my best days, I look for clues and ask questions to understand their thinking. Sometimes the clues are in the original email. "I have a 4.0. I'm an A student. I've worked on that assignment for 10 hours. And before responding, it helps me to pause and breathe and then smile with my entire face and imagine them sitting in the chair next to me at my desk, and then center myself before I start typing or before logging into our Zoom meeting. Like most, perhaps all of us here, I praise them for paying attention to their grades, for being committed to improving. I communicate my belief in their ability to succeed. And like Dad, I ask questions to help me understand how they've interpreted feedback, what changes they made or think they should make in the future to improve. On Zoom calls, I'll share my screen, pull up the instructions, the book, go to the success tips posted in the announcements, and then we'll look at the assignment together. I state my questions, assuming that they did their due diligence, even though frequently part of me is thinking, "Did you even read this information?" Instead, I'll say something like, "Well, when you read this, how did you use this information when you wrote that?" Or, "I'm not finding where you included this in your assignment. Did I overlook it? Explain to me what you think this means." Now, in subsequent communications with the student whose email I showed you, she shared she'd taken advice given in week 1 and worked with 2 separate tutoring on-demand tutors who reportedly told her her content looked great and she only had formatting errors, which was quite disturbing because her work was overflowing with serious Schlitzisms. And not the cute, laughable Schlitzisms, These were the kind of content and thinking errors that make educators cringe and cry out, no, no, what were you thinking? No, no, she really did not have the excellent grasp of the material she believed she did, and clearly did not know that she didn't know. So in this case, centering myself to step up my game and lovingly provide even more specific feedback helped her bring her grade up to pass with a C. Now, I share this example because empowering students to identify and correct knowledge and skill-based Schlitzisms and reduce schlitzing in their thinking are relevant to the grit intelligence paradigm Seligman discusses in Flourishing. As solid foundations of relevant information and skills that can be accessed and employed automatically are vital to flourishing. Now, when Jessie recruited me for this ED Talk, she asked me to take on Chapter 6. And in this chapter, Seligman focuses on a small subset of factors associated with intelligence to connect to the grit paradigm. But as someone who teaches intelligence theories and tests and has administered and interpreted hundreds of intelligence tests over the years, I understand intelligence to be multifaceted. And the interaction between intelligence and grit is much more complex than can be addressed in one chapter. Be that as it may, for now, let's consider some lessons learned from a contemporary Yolanda story, which holds opportunities for reflection. Now, you know, I like to think I have a decent portion of general factual knowledge on automatic associated with both verbalized and crystallized intelligence. And I'm usually pretty good about figuring out what's going on from contextual clues, but not always. For example, I was visiting Turks and Caicos a little over 3 years ago. It was day 2 of my vacation on this beautiful island. And after a delicious lunch of conch ceviche and crab with rice, I had a few hours before my glowworm and stargazing dinner cruise. Enough time to visit the other side of the island. And while checking out the scenery on the other side of the proverbial tracks, I noticed this beach had a different vibe from the beach where my resort was located. In the distance, the faint sound of reggae music played, cheerfully intermingling with the rhythm of the waves. After about a half hour of exploring, a friendly, preppy-looking West Indian man approached me and started up a typical conversation you might expect a local to have with a tourist. Where are you from? Is this your first time on the island? How long is your stay? What have you seen so far? And we continued in random, trivial chit-chat. And then he asked, "Can I get you anything?" And I looked puzzled. So he explicitly stated what he meant. And he said this word that to me sounded like congee. And the specific flavor of congee that automatically came to my mind is a recipe given to me by Dr. Wong, a doctor of traditional Chinese medicine made of rice and mountain yams or mountain potatoes. But no, that couldn't be what my West Indian acquaintance said, because it just wasn't logical to me that this particular man was offering me mountain potato porridge on the beach. So I said, "Excuse me," knowing I must have misheard him. So he repeated the word, and it still sounded to me like congee. What? Congee. I don't understand. Congee. As if saying the word louder and slower would magically result in my comprehension. It did not. So we went round and round a few more cycles of him repeating the same word and me not understanding. At this point, I'm getting frustrated, and he's frustrated. And finally, in exasperation, he says, "Pot, do you want some pot?" And magnifying our cumulative exasperation, I exclaimed, "A pot of what? No, I'm not hungry. I just had lunch." And you could see the precise moments in time when the impact of my words registered in his frontal lobe, his amygdala, and then his motor cortex. He was stunned. His whole body shivered, And with a look of defeat, he realized that despite the fact that we were on his island and arguably his beach, he was the one in the wrong place, and he silently turned his back to me and hurried away. Woo, and I was so happy to see him go. Yes, I was happy to see that man leave. And I enjoyed the remainder of my time on that beach in peace before returning to my resort on the other side of the island. And the rest of my vacation was very pleasant. No one else offered me any Chinese mountain potato porridge, and I did not give the encounter another thought until 2 weeks after returning to Tennessee. I decided to check an email account I only check a couple of times a month. And when I hit the landing page, one word in a news headline caught my attention, and I had an aha moment. The word marijuana was in the headline, and in an instant, I was transported back in time to that frustrating interaction on the other side of the island. And I said, oh, I bet he meant that kind of pot. And upon that realization, I cycled through a number of noteworthy cognitive and emotional states. First, curiosity. I wonder what that word was that sounded like congee. To being tickled at myself for having such a fruity frame of reference that colored my perception of what he was trying to communicate. And then, like a volcano erupting, all of my implicit biases about people who sell and use drugs became explicit, and I became both irritated and offended. How dare he think I was someone it would ever be appropriate to offer pot to? No, it wasn't pretty, but implicit biases rarely are. So then I redirected myself to self-correction, to have some compassion and a healthy dose of humility, prompting me to be grateful to my parents for instilling in me self-control and not passing on any genetic predispositions or raising me in an environment that might have led me to be a potential patron for what my porridge peddler was peddling. And also for yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong, mindfulness, reframing, and creative artistic pursuits that provide non-chemical options for managing my thinking and emotions and fortify my resilience. And then, profound relief and even more gratitude sunk in because my emphatic answer of no got that porridge peddler to leave me alone and was indeed the correct answer, even though I had no idea what he was saying. Now today, I reflect on the rising level of frustration my porridge peddler portrayed as he repeated the same word over and over. And I wonder, how often do we repeat the same feedback over and over, week after week, class after class, and get frustrated when we don't see improvements in comprehension and performance? When we've proactively provided success tips and given feedback every way we know how, written, audio, video conferences, referrals to the Writing Center, to tutoring, to CHAMPS, teachable moments, live learning, assignment resubmissions, and continue to see little or no improvement, how do we activate our own grit to maintain our passion for promoting student learning and success and to persevere in encouraging our students to persevere? And how do we avoid psychologically walking away in frustration like my porridge peddler on the beach? Now for me, to facilitate flourishing and gritty and resilient victorious cycles, and to avoid psychologically walking away from our most challenged students in our open access university, this goal helps to keep me centered. Now, undoubtedly, some of our students do not yet have the knowledge and skills on automatic needed to flourish everywhere they'd like to. And even though the effect size is small, eventually, grittier students are more likely to succeed and flourish. So where do we come in? Original grit theory suggested that as iron sharpens iron, grit strengthens grit. And that appears to be true for those already at higher grit and ability levels. But spoiler alert, for many, we have to start with growth mindset, strengthening growth mindset. Now, a review of the research will quickly reveal that different authors emphasize different components of grit, and some aspects of the model have stood the test of time and empirical research, and others have not. If we look at the equation of grit equaling passion and perseverance of effort has a larger impact on achievement than passion. And we all know people who persist in jobs, relationships, and other endeavors that they're not passionate about. In addition, the effect of grit on academic success is enhanced for those with higher intelligence and greater self-efficacy, those who already believe they can succeed. The case I shared earlier is a great example of that. My student, who claimed to have an A average in all of her other courses, demonstrated high self-efficacy, so candidly pointing out her numerous slipsisms or factual errors and showing her why her conclusions were incorrect did not discourage her in the least. But not all of our students have high self-efficacy, conscientiousness, a future orientation, and strong perseverance traits. For many, there are significant challenges to overcome to fortify gritty and resilient victorious cycles. And here, the research offers both good news and bad news. Bad news first. In a systematic review by Fernandez Martin et al., they report that interventions to improve traits like perseverance and conscientiousness show limited to no success. But the good news is that interventions to improve traits like interventions to improve skills related to grit do hold promise. Similarly, focusing on correlates of perseverance can meaningfully impact academic success. Now, a host of other characteristics related to grit are discussed in the literature, with resilience being a big one. And if we aspire to apply the model in culturally responsive ways, then a review of points raised by Schreiner are worth reflecting on. Because while the grit intelligence paradigm may resonate for me, who had many privileges setting me up for academic success, the inherent meritocracy-based assumptions underlying the framework of many grit intelligence-based paradigms are not equally affirming of all our students' realities. Once more, the inherent meritocracy-based assumptions underlying the framework of many grit and intelligence-based paradigms are not equally affirming of the realities of all of our students. Fortunately, what we can do is begin with resilience. As mentioned, persistence is the active ingredient in the grit equation, and resilience enhances persistence, and resilience can be strengthened and has broad applicability. Now, of course, we all have our own recipes for resilience, and the unique mix of active ingredients differs for each student and for each of us. Thus, when I am centered and set my intention to be aligned in ways to maximize my resilience, it's much easier to discover or create effective solutions based on the circumstances, the needs, and the resources available. And then I'm in a better place to be the gritty and resilient educator I'm passionate about being, to the benefit of my students, their loved ones, communities, our university, and the world. And with that, let's invite Jessie back to the mic as we revisit the first 3 questions posed. Jessie?
Yolanda, thank you so much for taking us on that trip of grit. I love it. It has really caused me the reflection, especially examining those cycles that we can get caught in and trying to proactively create flourishing grit cycles for our students, and also recognizing where our students are coming from and meeting them where they are, pausing to consider the privilege of grit and how we can continue to scaffold and build that up. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing your story. And I'm so excited for this discussion. For those of you here today, as we open up the chat lines to consider your takeaways from Dr. Harper's story, let's frame our discussion. What are you currently doing in your practice to support students' success? What are you inspired to do next? I'll read the questions from the screen for us to consider here as we reflect our own practice, looking through that lens of flourishing and supporting student success. What strategies can higher education professionals employ to aid in their understanding of how students' mindsets and frames of reference impede or enhance student learning and performance? How can we communicate positive expectations, that optimism to students that they will succeed in the future if they persist? How do instructors and students' grit and resilience interact to create either discouraging and disheartening vicious cycles or those gritty and resilient victorious cycles of flourishing? Please start sharing your impression, your ideas, and perhaps your new approach in the chat. And do be sure your chat is set to everyone. We would also love to hear from you. To share with us using your audio, simply raise your hand using the hand icon at the bottom of your screen, and you'll be given the opportunity to unmute your microphone and share your story or reflection that way. We invite you to join the conversation now to inspire others with your story. And I already see these comments coming in. Jerry shares with us again. Thank you for the fantastic presentation. Oh, my chat's going crazy here. It's going over here. I've got to find it again. Lots and lots of kudos here, Dr. Harper. Oh, there it is. Okay, so Jerry shares in the chat, loving the recentering concept and that pause and smile and reflect. What a great way to bring students' focus back to the learning objectives. And Harla emphasizes student passion as a part, making the course content relevant to each student and how that relates to grit.
Absolutely. Recenter and be ready. I love that, Jackie. Yes, a lot of these courses we have taught many, many times, but you're right. It is the first time for many students. And even if it's their third time, they still need us to be there and help them be gritty. Yes, Stephanie. Yeah, no model, as we all know, no model is perfect. And it's a starting place, and we take what works, but realize our students, just like we are, individuals.
Julie brings in an example of something she often tells students in their writing, that they're missing their academic voice. And one day she decided to ask the student what that meant, and his response revealed that he had no idea what was meant. It reminds me of your example there with the miscommunication and understanding. And so Julie emphasizes, like you said, it's important to ask questions to fully understand the student perspective, as it can be very revealing and reduce our own frustration, getting back to those cycles of trying to enhance flourishing.
Absolutely, because once I better understand my students' perspective, then compassion, you don't even have to make it happen. It just happens.
Sandra, I was giggling along with her story as well. Sandra shares here, loving the story with the beer and the grit is something we cannot underestimate for academic and life success. And then emphasizes the book by Angela Duckworth.
Great point also, Harla, regarding sharing our own challenges can be helpful for some students. Absolutely. Particularly if the lesson learned are relatable to the students, so the takeaways can inspire them to implement some things that can help them be grittier and more resilient.
One thing that really stuck out to me, Dr. Harper, is that growth mindset strengthens growth mindset, and it reminds me of that piece of the scaffolding and bringing it out. And it's so true. What we present often sharpens what we're looking for, and then looking at what level we need to approach. Just thinking in the classroom, how many times in an interaction, whether it's in the course inbox, whether it's in a feedback interaction, that I feel I'm presenting it in the right way. But if I'm not opening my mind to that growth mindset of, we're not there yet, how could I reframe this? How can I take and understand exactly what it is that isn't clear from my my feedback or my communication to make sure that a student has what they need? So thank you so much for the inspiration there.
Great comments, Jesse. And you pretty much answered Julie's question in terms of starting with the growth mindset, because grit seems to be more of a trait rather than state experience. So grit itself is hard to impact, but correlates of grit, like resilience, growth mindset, we can impact. And a huge part of that is teaching strategies like cognitive reframing, mindfulness, and different ways to different perspectives, different ways to think about things, as well as helping students develop their own toolbox or toy chest of resilience strategies. Because the more strategies you have, then the more you have to pull from when life happens, because life does happen. Absolutely.
It does happen, and it happens outside the classroom, and it happens in the classroom, and making sure we're supporting, students to understand that. And I know you mentioned here that helping them understand that if optimism will help them succeed if they persist, and what steps it means to pivot if you're not persisting yet. There's the
Right.
growth mindset, the
Yes.
yet.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, I do think of it as the toy chest, because and if our quote unquote toolbox or toy chest doesn't have anything fun in it, we need to find some fun things to put in there, because that really helps with resilience, being able to laugh and smile. And
Your story had me giggling all the way through as well. Well, folks, all good things must come to an end. This conversation has really sparked so much literature, so much research, and so many ways that we can all go forward with these victorious cycles on flourishing and keeping our interplay with how we present in the classroom and how that affects our students and their grit and their ultimate flourishing and well-being. But as I said, all good things must come to an end. So before you go, we do want to provide an opportunity for you to get your certificate of attendance. If we can go to the next slide, please. You'll be seeing a QR code appear on your screen in just a moment. You can also access the Ed Talks homepage, where this recorded Ed Talk will be archived for future viewing, and certificates of participation through the link that was in your registration. And it should also now be appearing in your chat. So multiple ways to get to that homepage and access certificates and recordings. We also want to take a moment to acknowledge the work one more time of Martin Seligman for inspiring this series. Please do consider finding yourself a copy of Flourish, A Visionary New Understanding of Happiness and Well-Being. That is linked on our Ed Talks homepage as well. You can go to the next slide, please. Please do mark your calendars for the second Thursday of most months from now until October. We will take a break in July. Same time, same place to continue our series and discussion. Next up, please come back and see us in June, when our next session will be on June 13th, as Dr. Jackie Kiger shares with us Beyond Strength, Military Strong. We thank you for joining us today. And again, a huge thank you to Dr. Yolanda Harper for sharing with us to inspire our next steps in supporting our students and each other. On behalf of Assistant Dean Dr. Denise Maxwell and UAGC's College of Arts and Sciences, Department of Education and Liberal Arts, we wish you a safe, healthy, and impactful May, and we'll see you next month and for our commencement coming up in just a few weeks. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Dr. Harper.
Thank you, Jesse, and shout out to Jackie as well.